My name is Brandon and welcome to or welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you like what you see in here, you're more than welcome to hit the subscribe button so you stay notified every time I upload a new video. Okay, let's get straight on with today's video. Hey everyone and welcome back to Is That More Brandon. So in today's video I'm going to be doing a review of the 4th episode of The Apprentice. So without further ado, let's get straight on with today's video. So at the beginning of this episode, I think for me the most complicated thing was working out who was actually on which team. So we found out that in Team Infinity, we were going to have Bradley, Avi, Danny, Shazia, Simba, Rochelle and Joe. So that was a team of 7. And then on the girls team, otherwise known as Apex, we were going to have Victoria, Megan, Reese, Denisha, Mark, Marnie and Sahel. So there was 3 people that moved from one team to the other, but they are the teams as of now. For Team Infinity, Bradley, Simba and Shazia all put themselves forward, and Bradley said if they were going to be able to do a vote, he would vote for Simba. So Simba became the project manager, and obviously from the other team, Lord Sugar wanted Denisha to be the project manager to prove that she could lead people. In terms of some of the items, it included things like a barometer, a puppet, a lace frontal, which was ombre, a palord or a palorde, which Joe probably thought was a fish, and a 1974 winning song, which Rochelle obviously referred to as being a rare record. So for Team Apex, Marnie was obviously thinking about it's a vinyl 45. That made me start thinking it was either the 45th song released by a band, maybe the number 45 was relating to someone in the band, or that's just what they called those records in those days. And then obviously for Team Apex as well, Mark basically said that obviously some of them thought the flower was a rose, but it wasn't. The palord may have been like a flower or a rose, adding that roses don't grow in the desert. So there was a clue, but obviously the clue didn't match what they all thought. And then obviously for Danny and the other team, Team Infinity, she said that there seemed to be 4 main areas where the items were included, and if they start out further away from the centre of Brighton, they could then obviously work their way in. Tim actually said this was a fantastic idea, but he said it also wasn't the project manager's idea either. In terms of Denisha's team, so for Team Apex, she wanted to stick with the BN1 and BN2 postcodes. She didn't think about pricing. She didn't really work out who was actually going to be on which team. And then I think in the end, she put the team with the most items to find with the least amount of people, and the team with the most amount of people, the least amount of items to search for. So she didn't really work out her numbers properly. You would think more items, you need more brains, but she did more items, less brains, and less items, more brains, which obviously didn't really make sense. So yeah, Simba obviously went along with Shazia and Brad, so the 3 of them from the Team Infinity, they were a little mini team. And then from the Apex, it was Denisha. She took Sahel and Reese with her to do their little deals. Again, this is where kind of Marnie said to Denisha, you have 4 people on your team, like you need to have 4 because you're looking for more items, and she kind of said no. And Victoria then obviously pointed out, yeah, there was less people on the team, that there was more items to find. And on Denisha's team, where there was more items to find, she only had 3 people in her team, so they weren't really happy with her from the beginning. In terms of Team Infinity, Shazia basically found out that the Truggy was quite far away, and Bradley said to Simba they should start from the furthest away first, and then obviously work their way in, literally what Danny had suggested in their initial meeting. It was off to Sahel and Reese to the flower store, and I think he just called like a florist, and I think Sahel was told that the flower, the closest title to the flower was actually a fossil. So I think this is where maybe someone misunderstood, but they thought it was maybe a thistle or something, which I think later on we do find out that, yeah, Reese thought, the person on the phone said, yeah, it's a thistle, but actually no, it's a fossil. So I think at this point, Mark basically said, Victoria, this is your deal, you go in, you get a price, you sort it out. And then he kind of just went in, didn't even acknowledge that she was there. He did manage to get £1.50 for the vinyl record, but Victoria basically said that, yeah, she could have probably got a lower price, and also the fact that he said she was in charge and she didn't actually say a word, kind of a bit weird. Megan basically said, like, you obviously said Victoria was going to be in charge of this one, at least next time if someone puts themselves forward for a pitch, or if we all decide who's going to be doing the pitch, just let that person do it so it doesn't get messy. This was the sale to do with the body part thing, so I think Rochelle almost went in for a deal at 120, and then Avi basically just shouted £80. Yeah, so I think at this point Rochelle was kind of more annoyed at Avi, not annoyed at the person for not selling the product cheaper, more annoyed at Avi for kind of jumping on her deal. And the guy basically said, no, I'll give you it for 120 if I can get a cup of tea as well. So yeah, I think it was just a bit awkward because, yeah, I think she'd asked for 120, he brought it down to 80, she could have probably brought him down to 100, so they could have got somewhere in the middle, but Avi kind of ruined that. And then for Simba, Shazia and Bradley, they managed to get £12.50 for a boat. Bradley actually managed to get the person to come down to £12, so that wasn't too bad. And Simba basically said that he wanted Shazia to lead the vinyl record sale. With Sahel, Reese and Denisha, they were obviously all trying to work out what this Sahara Desert Rose was. Again, maybe it wasn't a rose, maybe it wasn't even a flower, maybe it was something completely different. And Reese actually saw a restaurant called Sahara Roses, or the Sahara Desert Roses, or something like that, like a Sahara Rose or something. And yeah, Denisha was just like, no, let's move on. Avi shut down Danny on travelling to the supplier. So this is when they were talking about one of the items, which was like asparagus. So they could have either bought it in a shop, which obviously would have been more expensive, or if they wanted to travel maybe 20 or 30 minutes, I think the lady at the front desk said it was actually no more than 15 minutes, they could have actually got that asparagus freshly made for cheaper. Danny suggested that could have been a good idea. Avi was like, no, we're literally running out of time, let's just buy what we've got. Mark and his girls went to a flea market. They were obviously asking some questions about the trug, the barometer, the palorde, for example, with Marnie thinking that a palorde or a palorde was some sort of leather item or some sort of furniture thing. And then going back to the other team, Shazia, instead of asking how much the vinyl records were, she just put in an offer of £3.50. When he said that they could be sold for £5, she then tried to go down to £1.50. So it didn't really work. And yes, she basically didn't manage to sell that for less than 70p than the other team. So I think they paid £3.50, and I think the other team actually only paid like £2, I think £2 or £2.50 or something like that. She said it was a great end result. I don't think it was. I think it was just good that they got that sale and the guy didn't sort of go, well, actually no, you can't undercut your own bid kind of thing. Yeah, so Denisha managed to get a wig for £27.50, so that was quite a good deal. Megan, Mark, Marnie and Victoria went to a flea market, couldn't find a barometer, and without realising, obviously Karen noticed, but they had all walked past a trug in the flea market, which was obviously one of the most important items. So she basically said if they would have just opened their eyes, they would have found that item too. Reese was on the phone trying to obviously get some asparagus, some fresh asparagus. And I think the guy on the phone just said, we open at 2:30, and then that was literally it. He obviously misheard that they had fresh asparagus. So when they got there, 20, 30 minutes later, it had already been out and picked like a day ago. So he was kind of like, well, hang on, I was told it was fresh. So they obviously didn't get that item. So again, both teams kind of messing up on at least one or two of the items. With Rochelle and Joe, they were talking about hair. So this is the hair product that they were looking for. Again, Rochelle almost came in here for a close. She managed to get the woman down to about 100 or 100, I think it was like 90 or something like that. And again, Joe stepped in, said 100, because obviously the lady in the shop was hesitating. So I think they brought her down from like 125 or something silly, but she couldn't go less than 100. Joe was just like, you know what, we'll take that. And again, Rochelle put in the offer of £97.50, but obviously without a quick close, she was wondering if that £2.50 was going to make the difference, and she hoped that that £2.50 was not going to make the difference between them winning and losing. Sahel, Reese and Denisha then went off to get their real life item thing made. So it was Sahel's belly button. I think it was £25, or I think it was 25 or 125, but whatever they paid for that. Mark managed to get a discount on the barometer by about £4, and Megan said, could they put the other item, which was I think the trug basket, could they put that on hold for about 30 minutes? Because when they went there to get the barometer was on hold by the other team, which they didn't realise, and they were like, right, if we buy it now, how much can we get it for? So obviously when the other team went to go and find the barometer, it had already sold, but luckily the lady had a spare one. And yeah, Marnie kind of was a little bit disappointed that Mark was only able to get £4 off of the barometer, saying that she probably could have helped bring that down even more. So although Mark was closing the sales, he wasn't closing them in the way that you can actually worry about the profit side. And then obviously, like I said, Simba, Shazia and Bradley then went off to go and get their barometer from the same place. She'd already sold it. They had another one, but it wasn't the one that they actually needed. I think they were kind of iffing and ahhing as to like whether they buy it or whether they don't. I think in the end they did. They didn't realise that was obviously going to add penalty points to their team. And obviously the lady that sold them the barometer, I think it was like a nautical barometer they were supposed to get, she said that a palorde was probably fish themed. So they went off to find a palorde or a palorde. Yeah, so like I said, this is where Reese found out that the asparagus was 1 or 2 days old, not fresh. Joe mentioned that the palorde or the palorde is a fish, and Simba's team had only just worked it out, like what it was. Danny I think just went to some random restaurant or some random shop and asked if they had any Sahara Desert Rose. And I think it ended up being some sort of like sweet or some sort of ornament or whatever. It wasn't actually a flower or actually anything with rose. It was more just like an ornament. Then you saw Mark carrying Victoria down the street, all of them running to the end of the Brighton Pier, because obviously they were like running out of time. And Reese said that if they were to lose, it would have been the lack of strategy. And Simba said that they weren't able to get the last 2 items. Obviously that wasn't great, but let's see if they made actually more money or they saved more money than the other team with the rest of the other items that were up for grabs. For Team Denisha, there was 12 people in the florists that said that the Sahara Desert Rose was actually not a rose. Reese, like I said, misheard fossil for thistle. Nobody told him that the asparagus was fresh. Again, Karen said that that's not what the person said on the phone. They just said, get there at 2:30, and you can obviously see it for yourself. Like I said, Hale took one for the team by obviously having his belly button mapped into some sort of weird shape. And obviously when Mark jumped into Victoria's negotiation, the seller would have actually gone down to 70p, probably if Victoria would have led that, but also if Mark would have been a little bit less businessy and maybe a little bit more chilled. I think he was very, I wouldn't say forward, but he was very like Markish. Karen obviously told their team that she was standing right next to the truck, and also she kind of criticised their team because they didn't do any phone calls on the phone, so they weren't able to have those connections or have interviews or like have chats. It was just more about going to the places and hoping that they were open or hoping that they had what you had. And I think Mark kind of jumped in and said, well actually I didn't want to spend 5 years on the phone. For example, the vinyl shop thing, you know that in the centre of Brighton, down a highway street, you're going to have vinyl shops. Is he going to spend his time calling every single one when he could just go there, pop in and out of every single one in 2 minutes, when they know exactly what they want? It was more of a, you should have done phone calls, but actually for some of the things, yeah, Mark was probably right. You could have just gone in like they did and just find things just randomly. And then obviously for Team Infinity, which was obviously Simba's team, Simba actually went to the Sussex Trug store, and surprisingly they had a Sussex Trug. They managed to get that price down from £25 to £12. That was incredible. Obviously Shazia led the vinyl negotiation before finding out the price of what the guy would actually sell them for, with Bradley saying that they should have got the price first and then offering, rather than offering and then kind of backing on your own bid. Obviously the sub team had Joe's lips done, so that was his little real life product thing. And Avi obviously kept saying £80, £80, £80 with the sculpture place, so maybe he was a little bit too forward as well, and they could have just been a little bit more chilled, a little bit more relaxed, maybe bring them down £5 at a time, and then they could have obviously made a little bit more money. In terms of Team Infinity though, they did manage to get 6 out of the 9 items. I think they spent £277 in total. They also spent money on the wrong item, so that was £302 in total, and they also got £150 worth of fines because of the wrong item and because of the items that they didn't get. So they actually only spent a total of £452.89. For Team Apex, they only managed to get 5 out of the 9 items. They already spent £311.50. They also got £200 worth of fines because they also spent on the wrong item and also missed 3 of the items out as well. They only spent £511.50 by £60 profit, I guess. Team Infinity won, which meant Team Infinity were going through to the next week. Just a reminder, so these are the people going through to the top 13. You got Bradley, you got Avi, you got Danny, Shazia, Simba, Rochelle and Joe. So all 7 of them managed to get through. No matter if some of their deals were not great, they were better than the other team. And the winners were actually off to see the Only Fools and Horses performance on stage. Avi said that the sub-team managed to get 4 out of 4 of the items, with Danny saying that Simba was a good PM. In terms of the losing team, so obviously Team Apex, Denisha said the sub-team only managed to get 2 out of the 4 items. Marnie explained that the other team was messing around with asparagus and spears rather than actually looking for the other items. And Reese basically said that the sub-team not being on the phone was a big contributor to the loss. In terms of the actual boardroom itself, Denisha said that she did have guided items for each team, get an idea of what they were looking for, what was easiest for them to get. I think Victoria said here that they were given 4 of the items they had no idea about. So not only was there less people on that team, or actually no, not only was there more people on that team, there was items that they had no idea what they were. So yeah, obviously I guess they should have used the phone. I think that they should have made use of the contact. But I think, yeah, giving 4 people 4 items that they didn't know, it was obviously going to take them longer, and they probably weren't going to get all 4, and that's probably why that task failed, because she put the wrong people on the wrong team. I think she also put the strong people on the other team, and she kept Sahel and Reese to maybe blame them, I don't know. But yeah, out of the 7 of them, Reese and Sahel probably the weakest in that task. And Mark basically said you have to create your own chances, which obviously kind of came back to bite him, because his chance of getting the vinyl, okay, that was great, but the chance of getting the trug, they spent £69.50 on the wrong one. So they took a chance, and that's what made them lose the challenge. If they wouldn't have bought that wrong trug and they would have got the correct one, they probably would have won the challenge. And then Sahel basically explained that there was a lot of phone snatching with the calls, so there were some points where he was on the phone, and in the taxi Reese would grab the phone, and yeah, it was just a bit of a weird mess up of a team. In the end, Denisha, project manager, decided to bring in Mark and Reese, obviously Mark being on the sub team, and obviously Reese being with her, kind of, yeah, thinking that he wasn't really doing much for the task. I think in terms of what Tim and Karen had said, Denisha basically, they said that she didn't prove herself, she wasn't able to lead, and obviously that's why they didn't win the challenge. Reese seemed to be asking a lot of the right questions, but he either wasn't listening to the answer or didn't care what the answer was and kind of went with whatever he thought the answer was. And then with Mark, to stay within a 500-meter radius, that's why they didn't get half of the items, unlike the other team who started out further and gradually worked their way in. In the end, the 3 of them were brought back in. Denisha said that obviously calling suppliers was actually quite frantic, so I think this is where she actually backed Reese, kind of saying, look, it was quite difficult, at least we tried. Reese, basically, I think he was told that he was basically on the phone throughout half the day, and I think Lord Sugar basically wanted to know what he actually did for the task, and he basically said, yeah, I was on the phone, sorting out logistics, and I also managed to close a deal. And Mark basically, yeah, I think they basically both put the finger on him, saying, well, hang on, why didn't you do calls for some of the items? And this is where he said, look, I'm on a street with 6 vinyl shops, why am I going to spend time calling all of them when I could just walk into all 4 of them or 6 of them myself and just find what I want to get? And yeah, in the end it was Denisha that was fired, so Lord Sugar decided it was time for her to leave. She basically said, I've got so much more to do in business. So I think it was a bit of a sad episode, because obviously, yeah, she did her best, I guess, but it wasn't good enough, hence why that team lost. Didn't really prove herself. Lord Sugar gave her that chance to step up as project manager and she didn't. Mark basically said all the right things to keep him in, and I think he did manage to stand up for himself. And I think Reese was just quite lucky that Denisha was worse in performance than he was, otherwise he would have probably gone. But yeah, that's pretty much it. There are now 13 candidates left. It is still quite difficult to work out front runners. I do think Marnie is still quite strong. I think Marnie, Megan, Mark, the 3 M's, Marnie, Megan, Mark. I do think Victoria's okay, but I think she could be a little bit all over the place. I'm starting to really like Danny as well. I think she's a lot more than just the giggly fun side that she obviously portrays very well. I think she's definitely very smart. She's definitely very good at public speaking, and she's obviously quite confident. She managed to get some of those sales there, and also she found that Sahara Desert Rose, which literally no one even knew what it was. She just walked into some random side shop and found it. So yeah, I feel like she's one of those people that's able to take those risks. So I think Danny, I think Mark, I think Megan, I think Marnie, Joe. I mean, it's not just because he's hot, but I think he's also, yeah, I feel like he's got some brain cells. So I think they're probably my top 5. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next episode. But yeah, other than that, enjoy the rest of your afternoons or wherever you are. And I'll be back very, very soon with another review of The Apprentice. So until then, thank you for watching and goodbye.